A continuación vamos a ver una entrevista con Peter Lundblad, uno de los desarrolladores más importantes de la comunidad de software libre y en concreto del proyecto Subversion, al que he tenido la oportunidad de hacer algunas preguntas sobre su proyecto y la comunidad que lo desarrolla. Next, you will see an interview with Peter Lundblad, one of the most important developers of the free software project called Subversion, and which I had the opportunity to make a few questions about his project and the open source community who develops it. Thank you, Peter.
Este es un vídeo para el curso de software libre que se pondrá en berlios.de y publicado por Enrique García. So, hello Peter. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and your involvement in the open source community?
So my name is Peter Lundblad. I'm originally from Sweden, but now I live in Zurich. I have been using open source software since I started using Linux in the mid-90s, but basically done very little regarding actual contribution until, I mean, except for some small bug fixes and bug reporting and stuff, until I started working on a project called Subversion in 2004. And after that I was quite heavily involved in that project and did lots of contributions over the years.
Great. So you can basically call yourself an expert in Subversion, I guess, right? So let's talk a bit about the project itself. As I understand, Subversion was created in the year 2000 as an effort to write a free controversial system like CVS, but yeah, which fixed some of their bugs and misfeatures. Would you explain a bit about it and how the structure evolved since then?
So Subversion was started as a project in 2000, and it was released with its 1.0 version in 2004, approximately when I got involved. And the basic things that people wanted to fix were that commits in CVS are not atomic, so if you commit several files, the commit can break in the middle, or you can break it on purpose, and then only half of the files are committed. And it's also true about CVS that you can't version directories and directory operations, so CVS does only know about files. So if you move a directory, that is very hard in CVS, and that's also a problem they wanted to fix when starting this. The problem was also with CVS that it had been around for a while, and it was based on other software like RCS, which is an older revision control system. So it was very hard to maintain and to extend. So instead of trying to do this in CVS, they decided to just throw it away and create something completely new, and that became Subversion.
And it worked out, indeed, I think.
It worked out, I agree.
Also, can you explain a bit about your involvement in the area where you actually worked in Subversion?
So I started with something simple. So there was already an effort going on to make Subversion speak different languages. So my first thing was to actually translate the software to Swedish, which means you get a long file with message strings in English, and then you have to insert what these are in Swedish, and then this gets, at runtime, this gets used when the program wants to output some messages. This was a great way to get involved. Then I did lots of performance optimizations in different parts of the code, because one of the guidelines they used when developing Subversion is to do something that's correct first and then optimize later. That meant that there were many things that could be improved. Some of them were quite easy and others were harder, so that it actually got quite a lot faster. And I was doing this in some operations and also in, for example, code that handles the working copy on the client side and all sorts of stuff. Yeah, so I've done lots of things, done some features and some, of course, reviewed and approved patches from others, and all the things that come with a project like bug triaging
And I guess your fixes and performance optimizations were really welcomed by the original developers. And
sure.
Great. Let's talk a bit about free software in general and open source. Let's first talk about the license itself. Subversion, as far as I understand, is licensed under a PASH license. Do you have any idea why this one and not another one like GPL?
So I was not involved in these early discussions, but I am pretty sure that many people working with Subversion early were coming from the Apache world, and there it was natural to use the Apache license, and many of them don't like the GPL, for example, because if you are using software that's written in GPL, the General Public License, you have to also make it GPL, which means some people call this way of licensing viral, because if some part of your system is using this license, all of it has to be more or less. And some people don't like this, because then, for example, in a company, if you want to use the Subversion libraries and extend it, you also have to, if you want to redistribute the code, you also have to actually make it GPL, and it makes it harder to use the software in companies and in certain
corporate environments.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit about the community itself. These are basically two questions. What basically motivated you to work in Subversion and not in something else? And what would you somehow highlight about the community that's around Subversion?
So for Subversion, I think there were two important factors. One was that I really didn't like the version control system we were using at my company. So I wanted something else. I went looking for something, and so one of the more mature, that wasn't CVS, because I didn't think that CVS would fit our needs, was actually Subversion. The other, so that's why I started to look into it and look into using it. The other important thing is I was kind of wanting to do something except for my day job, and I managed to have some time for this at that time. And since I have started looking into this project, I just started looking into the code, and since it was very nice, very well written and very well organized, nice C code, I actually started to think that, well, maybe I could contribute something. And there were actually, as I said, except for the translation work, which basically was a way to get in, there were quite easy optimization work that could be done to start with, because it's kind of a good thing when you want to enter a project that there's something that isn't too complicated that you can start with, so you can get accustomed to the processes and start actually doing something that actually gets into the main code.
It's nice. So basically you started as a user, and then you saw that it could be improved, and went up. That's a great way to start. Yes. In fact, is this a way you would recommend to a young computer science student interested in getting involved to an open source project?
I think you need some motivation. So if you are a user, that's probably very good, because then you actually have to use what you produce, and you also understand the software from a user perspective. And for starting, pick something simple. So for me, as I said before, the translation work, I mean, that's okay, it's not exactly trivial, and maybe my skills are not the best for actual linguistic work or something, but still it was something that I could do without understanding the project, and I mean the details of the code. So I could get basically starting to watch how the mailing list worked, how people were people were having their conversation over the IRC, and how all these things worked, and I could watch this and still get something done and get the trust of people. And then I started doing small things and asked around on the mailing list, and people were very friendly. So I think that's the way you should do. Don't take on something too big and promise to do this and then get burned out halfway, but instead start with something small.
What's the acceptance of the, like, in your first patches? How easy was it to like just submit them?
So it was quite easy. In general, the code is well written and very readable. So I would say that people are quite picky about the code, both from a stylistic and from a correctness point of view. So I guess I had a few rounds back and forth with my first patches, but that's something that continued even after I got to be a so-called full committer with full commit access. There were always reviews and people suggesting improvements and pointing out errors in the code, but that's a good thing, and you should expect it and you should appreciate it, I think.
Yes, and probably you learn a lot from that, right? Back and forth.
Definitely, that's where I learned very big part of what I know.
Good. So we're running out of time, so just let me ask a last quick question about this particular video. This is intended to be licensed under the Creative Commons license for educative purposes. What do you think about this?
So I'm a developer and not a licensing expert. But I think this is a very great thing, and it's a very good way of sharing information.
Okay. Well, this is all. Thank you very much. I'm gonna just thank the audience in Spanish, and say bye. Muchas gracias a todos por escucharnos. Y un saludo desde Zurich.
Thank you too.